Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Well, today I'm finally going to get around to addressing a subject that you guys have been asking me to cover for about 3 or 4 years now. And that is the subject of cleaning track. How do I do it? What do I recommend? What do I not recommend? So stick around for the video and I'll cover all of those subjects. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Let's go ahead and get started. But I want to tell you what I'm going to cover today. First, I'm going to give you my take on the use of NoOxID, and that's something that has been popping up for several years now. Then I'm going to go over what I suggest that you not do, because I think it's important to cover that right up front. Then I'm going to talk about what I do and how I go about keeping my track clean. Then I'm going to wrap up by showing you a new solution that has recently come to my attention and that I'm going to be testing over the next few months to see if it is as good as I've been told. So let's take a look at what I've got here. Okay, so first let's talk about NoOxID. Now NoOxID is something that popped up on my radar about 4 years ago when Joe Fugate did an editorial in Model Railroad Hobbyist about track cleaning solutions. And then right after that, folks started recommending NoOxID as the perfect cleaning solution. You'll never have to clean your track again. I was not convinced from the very beginning, and for one or two very important reasons. So first, take a look at this screenshot from the NoOxID website. And you can see I've underlined right up front where they tell you that this stuff is a grease. It is made to be used as a lubricant for switches and other electronic devices in extreme environments where they have to be protected from corrosion and oxidation and such as that. And grease is great for that. Now, unfortunately, the thing I don't like about grease is that you put it on your track and it's going to impact on the tractive effort of your locomotives. And this has been brought out several times by various YouTubers. Now, Ron on Ron's Trains and Things has had some success with using it on his layout, although he did say that it did reduce his tractive effort somewhat. Then Hans Tanner on his IOTT channel about a year ago came out with a video where he looked at NoOxID and did some measurements and found that it reduced his tractive effort of his locomotives by as much as half. Now that's considerable, and that's something that I'm not willing to deal with on my model railroad. In addition, several friends of mine have been using this stuff. One of them in particular has a very large railroad, maybe 1,500 square feet in his basement. And he put NoOxID on his rails and spent about a week getting it off again. Now, another person who reported his experiences with it was Steve Brown, who has a YouTube channel, It's My Railroad. And in video 112, which appeared about a year ago, Steve reported back on his results with using NoOxID on his model railroad. And his comment at that time was, "I was dumb enough to put this crap on my track." And that sounds like a pretty good warning to me. And as with my friend, he had put it on his track, found that it didn't work at all for him, and spent about a week getting it off of the rails and all the wheels of his locomotives and rolling stock. So this is something you have to think about long and hard before you jump in on the bandwagon and start using some of this stuff. Now, why don't I like NoOxID? Well, I told you. For one thing, it reduces your tractive effort, and any grease is going to do that. Back in the steam days, they used to have what they called a slip track in the yards. And they would take a section of track and cover it with grease, and then after an overhaul, they would put a steam locomotive on the slip track, open up the throttle, and let the thing run for a while, and then they could watch it and make sure all the bearings were doing fine, make sure all of the seals were working right, make sure the valve gear motion was correct. And then they could release it for use out on the road after it had been broken in on the slip track. Now the second issue, and Steve Brown summed it up by saying, this stuff attracts dust and dirt like a magnet attracts iron. And that's what I'm really concerned about, that you're going to be using grease on your track and it's going to attract dirt and dust, and you're going to get more buildup of that nice black stuff. And Steve shows on his video, and I'll put a link to that video because I thought it was pretty good in that respect. Steve shows that when he went to clean his rails, they were grungy as all get out. Now some people, particularly Ron of Ron's Trains and Things, have reported that they have had excellent results with it until recently. And then in his most recent video, he did report that he was needing to go back and clean his track again to get rid of dust and dirt that accumulated on the rails. So don't think that by using NoOxID and grease on your rails, that you're going to be able to finally stop doing any cleaning on your model railroad. So that's my take on NoOxID. I'm not going to use anything that has grease as its primary component. Now, what I do not recommend, though, is using anything that is highly flammable. And both of these, you've got lacquer thinner, mineral spirits. You will see people recommend gasoline, kerosene, lighter fluid, all kinds of things like that. Please avoid doing stuff like that. I mean, all of this stuff, it says right here, highly flammable. It can cause flash flame-ups as a result of just the vapors in the room. And all of these things are like that. So avoid using highly flammable liquids. No matter how safe you think you're being and careful you are being, Murphy's Law will come into play sooner or later. And that is something that you can count on. Sooner or later, if something can happen, it will happen. Now, another thing that I don't recommend using are the really nasty organic solutions. And again, things like mineral spirits, lacquer thinner, acetone, all kinds of things like that. They have warning labels for a reason. Read them. And, most of that stuff, they tell you, use it outdoors or in a very, very well ventilated area. Be very careful with it. Be very careful with the fumes. You can have flash ups, flash fires, all kinds of things like that. It's not worth the chance, let me tell you. Okay, another thing, as I said about using NoOxID, avoid anything that has greases and oils in it. And that includes NoOxID, that includes things like automatic transmission fluid, WD-40. Wall clipper oil is something that has been periodically used by model railroaders for decades. And every once in a while it pops up and people start using it. They get the bandwagon effect going and everybody says, oh, this looks great. And then they find out why they should not be using it on their model railroad. It's made for lubricating hair cutters, hair clippers. It is not made for cleaning track. And finally, avoid any kind of sticky or gooey types of materials. And one of those that has always been a favorite of mine is this one right here, Goo Gone. It's a great cleaner for what it's made to do. It's not made for cleaning your rails on your model railroad because, yes, it has a petroleum distillate in it that will clean your rails. It will dissolve that gunk on your rails. However, that nice orange smell that it has, that is a very, very sticky substance once all the other stuff evaporates. And it gets on your rails, and the dust and the dirt is attracted to it, and immediately it will create more of that gray, black gunk that you see on the wheels of your cars and your locomotives and on your rails. So don't use this stuff because, we tried it at the Northern Virginia Model Railroaders back about 20 years ago, and we ended up having to clean all the rails and all the cars again because it just made a big mess. Just like grease, it will attract dust and dirt like a magnet. So now you know what I think you should not do. Let me show you what I do and what I recommend. Now right off, just for normal operations, for normal cleaning, I like to use a lint-free cloth. And one of the best ways that you can get lint-free cloths is to go down to your wife's rag bin and find an old t-shirt that's been washed to death. This stuff has been washed so many times, as I say, all of the lint is basically gone. So you can use it, and it works great for just getting the dust and the dirt off of the rails. And I will use just a small piece of this just to clean off the rail heads when I notice I'm getting a little bit of dirt and dust building up. If you're in a basement or in an attic or anywhere you've got an unfinished ceiling, then you're going to have dust and dirt filtering down onto your rails all the time. The same thing, if you have unfinished concrete walls and floors in your basement, then you will have exfoliation of that concrete dust, and it's going to get up and into the air and on your track. If you have a cat or a dog, you're going to have a certain amount of hair and dust created by them that's going to end up on your rails. Same thing with people. If you have people coming around in your layout, believe it or not, one of the big components of dust is dead skin cells that flake off. So it happens, and it's something you have to just deal with. So all you have to do is just run a dry, clean cloth across that, and it will remove a lot of that free dust and dirt. And that's assuming you don't have grease on your rails that it's going to be attached to. Now, another thing that I like to use is an old piece of Cork sub roadbed here. And you can cut these, you can break them into sections, and just use that to scrub the surface of the rails. And it works sort of like a Brite Boy, except that it doesn't have any abrasives in it. So for some of the more resistant stuff, you can use that to clean off your rails without any problem. Now, another option, though, for your regular cleaning and regular operations is the Masonite slider. And I did a video on how to make your own slider cleaner cars, and I'll put a link to that above me here. And you can see it's very simple. It's just a piece of Masonite hardboard, okay? Tempered hardboard is the common name, but Masonite is what most people in the U.S. call it. And it's just a piece wide enough to go across both rails, but will fit underneath of a car. And then you simply drill a couple of holes in the bottom of a car, attach a couple of nails to the slider, paint it black so it's less visible, and then you can just slide it in there. And because it is angled at each end, it's going to slide over your crossings and things of that nature, so it's not going to catch on stuff. Now, you always want to put the rough side towards the rails, and that's going to give it a little bit of a scrubbing effect. And eventually, when enough gunk builds up on this, you just take it, put it on a piece of sandpaper and sand it, and get a nice new exposure. Eventually, after 20 or 30 years, you might actually wear through this and need to replace it. But this is something that goes back to, I believe, John Allen first showed how to build these things. So it's been in use for over 50 years, 70 years maybe, and they work great. You just put a bunch of these in your cars and distribute them in your fleet, and they will just ride along and basically keep the top of your rails clean. So that's a nice way to do that. Now, this car here is something that was made by a company called Aztec. I don't think they're in business any longer. It has a reservoir here where you can put a cleaning liquid in it, and then it has a little solenoid with a plunger that you can control using a function-only decoder like this one here. And then you can use that to open and close the plunger, which turns on the liquid flow. And on the bottom, it's got these two rollers. These are canvas rollers, and they distribute the liquid across the rails, and they'll pick up a little bit of dirt in the process, as you can see here. It also has a little magnet for picking up steel particles or iron particles on the track. So it's a pretty nice little device. Unfortunately, as I said, no longer available. He also made one like this with a rubber roller in here. And this is a material called Kratex that has abrasive in it, so it would clean your rails like a Brite Boy. And it has a magnet in this one that picks up stuff. It's got quite a few pieces in it right now. So you can use those two together. Another thing that he made were these rollers with cloth on them that you could substitute in here. And so if you were using your liquid here, you could come along behind it with one of these installed in this car and clean off some of that liquid as you go. So those are there are a lot of these cleaning cars available out there. Tony's Trains makes one like this. It's made out, I believe, of brass or bronze and has a tank car built into it. that dispenses the liquid. So that's one of the options available out there, is something like that. And as I said, there are several track cleaning cars available on the market, and that allows you to run track cleaning cars in your trains so that you normally will get rid of a lot of the dust and dirt that builds up on the rails on a regular basis. Okay, but what about when you get into really dirty situations, like after applying a lot of scenery, after painting your rails, and things of that nature? Well, in cases like that, you can sometimes use just a clean rag to clean it off. If it's just, pieces of foam, flocking and things of that nature, then you can get that off. That'll come right off. It's when you've got dried glue from scenery application and dried paint that has attached itself to the rails that you need to be a little bit more aggressive. And in cases like that, I will just use good old isopropyl alcohol on my rag, and that will remove a lot of this stuff that has not really hardened. So glue and paint that is just set up a bit, sometimes you can get it off just with the rag saturated with isopropyl alcohol. When it really comes down to it, if you have dried glue, dried paint, things of that nature on here, get a Brite Boy and use a Brite Boy, and that will bring the shine back to those rails, and you can get all of that glue off of it. It's not an issue for a Brite Boy. And they make different ones. This is a nice size one. I think this is one that was made by Microengineering, and it does a very, very good job. For you guys in the UK, I know that DCC Concepts makes a really good cleaning block like this as well. Now finally, I want to share with you a new product that Larry Meir at DCC Specialties told me about when I asked him what he used for cleaning his truck. And what he came up with surprised me. It's something called DeOxIT, not to be confused with NoOxID. So this is another one of those chemical solutions that comes in a liquid form. It is not a grease, although they do sell a grease version of it. And you can buy these 25 milliliter bottles of the concentrated material for use on your model railroad. And Larry told me that he has been using this for years. He uses it for cleaning his own model railroad, which has a 2% helix on it. He has used it on demo layouts. He has used it on a museum layout where trains are operated by visitors, and it just makes operations so reliable. And it's something that he uses on locomotives and electrical contacts, all of that kind of thing, to help improve electrical conductivity. And basically this stuff, it seems to be a solution that is very similar in many respects to how NoOxID works. It combines with the oxides and sulfides in the metal and helps remove those, and it also combines with the metal on your rails in order to prevent further oxidation of the surfaces. And that's something you want to do, because a lot of these oxides of these metals just are not electrically conductive. So if you get oxides building up on your rails, it's basically something that's going to serve as an insulating layer between the wheels and the rails and prevent good conductivity. So how does this stuff work? Well, let me first point out, it comes in a package like this. So you've got this little bottle here that comes in this blister pack. I got this off of Amazon, and it's not cheap. This little bottle here, 25 milliliters, was $27. So you're going to pay through the nose for it, but of course NoOxID is not cheap either, and nor are many of these other cleaning solutions that you can buy. But at any rate, you take this and you put it in a pint bottle, and you add almost a pint of isopropyl alcohol. So you're basically creating about a 5% solution of the concentrated DeOxIT. And that seems to be enough when it's applied to your rails to do a great job. Now the way Larry applies this, he uses one of the Tony's Trains liquid track cleaners, and he just pours this into the reservoir in that and runs it around the layout, and that spreads it all over the place, and then he just runs trains on it. Now, what I plan to do though is take it and just use it as you would with a rag and run it across the top of the rails so that you're just getting a very light coat on the top of the rails. And then let that sit a while and then run some trains on it to disperse it on your model railroad. Because I am eternally a skeptic about these kinds of things, I am going to take this and I'm going to apply it to the approach track for my helix. And my helix is somewhere between 1.8 and 1.9%. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to first test my, run a test train up the helix, and I'm going to put just enough cars on there to where it can go up the helix without any problem. And then I'm going to apply this to the rails, and then I'm going to run the locomotive with its string of cars up the helix. And we're going to see if it's going to have any negative effects on tractive effort. Now this stuff, it doesn't have an oily consistency to it, so let's see how that works. And then after a month or two, I'll get back to you on this and let you know how it's working. Whether or not it's doing a great job on the helix and preventing oxidation and lessening the frequency with which I have to clean those tracks, and whether or not it has any impact on the tractive power of the locomotive. So stay tuned on this one. I'll be back with more about how well DeOxIT D100L works. And for any of those of you who really want to jump on the bandwagon and test it out, all you have to do is look for the DeOxIT D100L 25 ml container on Amazon, and it's easy to find. Just look for DeOxIT D100L. And this blister pack that it comes in, very easy to find. Remember, it costs $27, so you might want to hold off until I can report back on my findings with using it on my model railroad. Well, that's it for today's video. So remember, the next time when you see a YouTube video or read an article in a magazine that says, use this product and you'll never have to clean your track again, run in the other direction, click off of that video, throw that magazine article away, and just ignore it. Because as far as I'm concerned, there is no magic bullet. There is absolutely no way that you're going to be able to get by without doing at least a minimal amount of cleaning of your track, because there's always some dust and dirt coming in from somewhere that's going to end up on your rails, and it's going to affect the electrical pickup of your locomotives on those rails. Okay, so that's it for today. Have a great week, have a great weekend, and enjoy the Christmas holiday. I'll see you here next week with another video from the DCC Guy. Bye now.